In today's video, I'm going to teach you how to get a job as a project manager with Meta. This video is the third video in the series, and it's all about the final interview. This is the last interview. If you've made it this far, this is all you have to do in order to get a job in the standard Meta project manager interview process. So I'm going to go through advice from the candidate that I interviewed, moved all the way up to this point. I'm going to give you the specific questions that they ask you in this interview, although that could vary depending on site, but it should give you a general idea of what you can expect to encounter from an interview question perspective, and I am going to teach you how to answer them. Let's go. Now, if you've watched the second video in this series of videos, you'll know that they use a lot of behavioral interview questions, and that does not change in this interview. They have a few here, and remember, the framework to answer a behavioral interview question is a STAR method: situation, task, action, result. Throw an L in the end for lesson to complete the picture here. But one of the advices that the person who went through and interviewed with Meta for a project manager role gave is that they would recommend having a lot of examples memorized and ready to go. If you've watched any of my videos before, one of the things that I recommend all people who are interviewing do is create an impact list. An impact list is things you've accomplished at prior companies and prior roles, and then recall what you did. What was the situation? What were the actions you took? What did you learn from it? What would you do differently? All these things. But it pays to refresh your memory of all the things you've accomplished in prior roles in your career, so you're ready to use them as answers to questions. So make sure when you go into this final interview, you've thought through some of your big project manager wins, because you're going to need to recall specifics from them in order to effectively navigate this interview. Now, before I get into the actual questions, I want to talk about the process. So this is 4 30-minute interviews back to back. So it's a round robin. So you'll be meeting with 4 people in 30-minute consecutive interviews. So it's about 2 hours of intense questioning and asking questions over and over again. I'm gonna go through a handful of the questions that you're gonna be asked. Now, the first question is, tell me about a time that you had to deal with conflict. So again, this is a behavioral interview question: situation, task, action, and result. At this point, you should be quite familiar with a few conflicts. My advice here is make it conflict of 2 people on the project you are managing, not yourself. So you can actually give an example of how you help them find resolution, and you're not a person who's actively participating in conflict, but instead you're someone who is providing solution. The next interview question is a great one for project managers, and it's give me an example of a time where you had to build consensus and what were the trade-offs. So this is awesome. Again, behavioral interview questions, so situation, task, action, result. And you just have to find a time in your career as a project manager in which you actually had a few different people or different parties. They wanted different things. What did you have to do so you could get them on the same page? Now remember, you need to be patient, you need to be understanding, and you need to be comfortable with this. Anytime they're asking you a behavioral interview question, it's because there is a high degree of likelihood that in the job, you're going to have to do that. You will experience it, and they want someone who is highly adept at navigating that. So what you need to be able to do is let them know you were comfortable with that. You've done that many times. Here's a great example of which you were able to do that. What was the situation? What was the task? What were the actions you took? And then what was the outcome? If you can do that, you're gonna do great. The next question is a critical thinking question, while also a behavioral interview question, and it's, can you give me an example of a time when you had to solve a problem with ambiguous information? Which is really interesting, because it is kind of like, it's kind of like the other one in the round 2 interview, where it's like, give me an example of a time where you had to do something without all the information. So this is ambiguous information, so it means it's not clear. So again, behavioral interview question: situation, task, action, result. And give them an example of a time where, without negativity, you didn't have all the information. So maybe there was pieces of it missing, and this means you're probably going to encounter it. So demonstrate comfort with that type of situation. And again, my advice is similar to how it was for the other question. You just have to let them know that sometimes having most of the information is good enough, right? Having almost everything is going to be good enough for you to solve the problem. It's going to be good enough for you to take what's available to you and make an educated guess and move forward, because that's just something you have to do. The next question, for a change, is actually not a behavioral interview question. It's, how do you define project success? So they're trying to get an idea of exactly what it is you see as success as a project manager on a project that you're managing. I'm not going to tell you how to answer this, because you're going to have your own definition. but it's one of those things where you just need to be ready for it. Think about that. How do you define it? Come with an answer ready to go. This is probably really easy for you to answer if you're prepared. If you're not, and you have to answer it on the spot and you haven't practiced, you're probably gonna be like fumbling through your words. But now you know what a question is, right? You know that how you define success in project management. You know what it is. Think about what that means to you. Practice through that a few times and you should nail this. The next question is another great one. It's describe a time when you had to work from scratch. So this question is behavioral interview question again. So situation, task, action, results, L at the end for lesson. But what they're trying to get at is you understanding project requirements. So you want to talk about bringing something from very beginning, understanding the requirements and bringing it all to the end. Should be relatively easy for you to answer as a project management professional. Just knowing this is a question, have your answer prepared, rehearsed, and ready to go. Now this question is very similar to a question you would have got earlier in this interview, but you are dealing with 4 different people, so they might ask you similar versions of some of the same questions. After all, there is only so many things they can ask you about project management, but this question is, have you dealt with dealing with people with different perspectives and building consensus? The answer has got to be yes, and then you've got to give an example. And you should be ready to roll into that smoothly. Situation, task, action, result. Again, it's something that you are comfortable with. This is something that's par for the course. In this line of work, you will need to do it. You are comfortable with it. Here's how you resolved it so that everybody was happy. Find an answer where you meet all those little boxes and you'll do fine. The last question is a little bit outside of the box, but I kind of dig it. And it's, what's a time you have learned something and used it in a different scenario? So it's kind of a weird question. Thinking about it, I was like, well, what do you mean by that? My best guess here is what you're trying to do is maybe it's something you learned on a project, something you picked up from someone else, and then you found beneficial to bring into your processes and use as a project manager. A little bit of a different question, really hard to answer if you're not ready for it, but you are ready for it. So think about it, practice your answer, and go into it with just a great response ready to go. Now this video is done, but I want you to watch this one right here. This video is just how to get a job with Meta in general. This is a great companion video because in this video, I actually talk about the culture, the values, different information about interviewing with Meta in general. But by watching these 3 videos in this series and then also adding in this one, you're gonna have a great shot at getting the job.